Today, I come to you with an episode based on one new piece of news, Francis changing a John Paul II papal document, and one old piece of news based on Francis changing papal teaching from another John Paul II papal document. Very, very interesting. The first one, the old document, is Familiaris Consortio from 1981, and the second papal document is Universi Dominici Gregis from 1996 or 1997. The news that's truly new is that Pope Francis is evidently, according to Diane Montaigne, going to change it such that at papal conclaves, when he dies, he's going to make it that 75% of the electors are cardinals, only 75% instead of 100%. Up to 25% can be lay women. Unbelievable. And this change, like almost everything Francis does, is questionable at best. This might be a dogmatic violation of some of the hardcore changes laid out by John Paul II's Universi Dominici Gregis. We'll get to that piece of news in a little bit, but the bigger realization that I had that made me want to do a rare Sunday show is the fact that I think I finally had a eureka moment with regard to, and it happened suddenly, it happened yesterday, with regard to why there are any honest Pope-splainers at all anymore after Amoris Laetitia. And my realization was this: most Pope-splainers do not understand the importance of JP2's document called Familiaris Consortio from 1981, which made a revolutionary change on the but a good revolutionary change, arguably, a workable, feasible revolutionary change on communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Specifically, Familiaris Consortio made it such that remarried adulterer who are in an adulterous second union, divorced and remarried civilly, who want to come back to church, want to receive reconciliation and communion, can, without leaving the cohabitation of their adulterous concubine, what civil law calls their second spouse, they can stay shacked up because a lot of them will have had a mixed family, kids together from the illegitimate children from this adulterous second union, bastard kids. And it would be wrong to deprive these illegitimate children of a mother or a father in the home. Familiaris Consortio in 1981 says this can be accommodated by allowing mother and father to stay in the home with their illegitimate child or children in their adulterous second union that is not an actual marriage, as long as the mother and father live in a Josephite way. That is to say, that they observe marital continence. Do you understand? There was a kind of canonical soft rule, soft teaching against this until 1981. That if you are divorced and civilly remarried, you can't go to communion or confession if you're still living with your adulterous second union, whether or not you have children. And JP2 said, well, I'm going to deny in the coming years, in 1982, 1983, 1984, the push by Walter Casper, who succeeded under Francis in making revolutionary changes, to make divorce for the civilly divorced and civilly remarried life altogether okay. But what I'll do in Familiaris Consortio is to say, as long as these people make a promise to their priest on behalf of the bishop to live continently they can stay shacked up and go receive the Eucharist and go back to confession. Why? Because as long as they're not committing the deed, as long as they're not having the marital act, because they're not married, each of them is married to someone else, the church will work with them. It was the perfect solution. It solved the problem. It solved the problem. Well, these people have gotten together. You can't go back in time. They've gotten together adulterously. They've had illegitimate bastard children together adulterously, but it's not those illegitimate children's faults. So what do we do? 1981, the year I was born, JP2 solved the problem with Familiaris Consortio, while denying Cardinal Casper, who wanted to make it okay for those people to have sex with each other still in their adulterous second union. JP2 said, nope. But what they can do is they can go back to communion and confession as long as they take a promise not to have sex with each other. Perfect. That was the end of the discussion. Except it wasn't, because Cardinal Casper in 1982, 1983, 1984 said more or less, but shouldn't they be able to stay married civilly, stay cohabiting, and keep having sex with each other? Pope John Paul II said no. Now, I want to refer you all to a very, very good article that comes from 2017. After Pope Francis had given Cardinal Casper his way the previous year and had said, yes, in adulterous second unions, spouses can continue having sex with each other as they return to the sacraments. Paragraph 301 that was what the 2014 and 2015 synods were about. And what I realized the other day, just yesterday actually, is that Sorab Amari, I think even Larry Chapp, who was discussing this problems with the Francis pontificate as pastoral problems, not doctrinal problems. They simply don't understand the error in moral philosophy. Paragraph 301 of Amoris Laetitia reads, it can no longer change. It can no longer simply be said that all those in any irregular situation, the adulterers that I'm talking about here in this context, are living in a state of mortal sin and are deprived of sanctifying grace. In other words, I'll reread paragraph 301 of Amoris Laetitia. The church for 2,000 years has announced a combination of natural and supernatural law that said adultery is a violation of God's law, natural, supernatural, and two adulterers who are cheating on their real spouse cannot get together, be having sex with each other, and have their cake and eat it too, and go to confession and communion. They're outside of the church. They're adulterers. They can't do it. But because of Amoris Laetitia, we're changing that. Because of Walter Casper, Sankt Gallen Mafia member, proud Sankt Gallen Mafia member, who after Familiaris Consortio in 1981 said, it's not good enough to allow these adulterers to continue cohabiting and raising their illegitimate child together. I want them to be able to have sex with each other and go to communion and confession. The year afterwards, he started lobbying for this. And JP2 is like, I just made the change. Well, no, they can't have sex with each other. But now if you're truly concerned of the child in this illegitimate adulterous situation, I just fixed it for you. Well, Francis granted Casper that in 2016's Amoris Laetitia. This article I'm reading from comes out the next year. And again, I'll read paragraph 301. It can no longer simply be said that all those in irregular situation are living in a state of mortal sin and are deprived of sanctifying grace. So the natural law has changed. You could say that before, But now you can't say any longer that two adulterers cannot have sex with each other. That's what Amoris Laetitia is really saying. Familiaris Consortio solved the only problem that the church would acknowledge. Well, this is unfair for children who are the product of an adulterous second union to not be raised in a house with their mom and their dad. So JP2 says, here, problem solved. Casper, the very next year, 82, 83, 84, says, no, I want them to be able to do the deed. This has nothing to do with the target problem of the children. Under the cover of ignorance, Casper pushes for 30, 35 years, and Francis ends up indulging him. And then you get ignorant parties that don't follow church teaching, that don't know the morphology or the chronology, the history of this. A lot lots of people that even we'd consider knowledgeable Catholics, converts, but Catholics like Sorabamari or even Larry Chapp, if he thinks this is merely a pastoral problem. It's not. I'm going to explain it all in great detail. They're saying, well, there's some fudge in here for Francis. He's just trying to solve this problem, as if Familiaris Consortio didn't solve it in 1981. They don't know that specifically what Cardinal Casper and Pope Francis were trying to solve for was not the problem they were saying they were trying to solve for. They were specifically angling that two adulterers can continue having sex with each other. That was the central problem of the 2014 and 2015 Synod, eventually dealt with in April of 2016's Amoris Laetitia. This was my eureka moment, people, parish orphans, retrogrades. That's why there are still folks out there who think that Francis is maybe blundering, maybe bad pastoral approach, but he's trying to do good. He is not. You guys simply, aside from the most dishonest pope-splainers, you don't know what the history of this issue is in terms of church teaching. 1981 is a red letter date. 1981 changed the church teaching in a way that was mutable, that could be changed. I'm not just saying that. I'm not a fan of JP2, but he's an honest son of the church who made many mistakes. I don't think a great pontificate by any stretch of the word, but not trying to be a heretic, not trying to do the wrong thing. Lots of bumps on the road. But he solved this problem. Okay, in a fallen world, divorcees go out and they're quick to remarry. They want to have sex with someone. They don't want to have sex with their old spouse. That's boring. They want to have sex with someone new. Gonna find someone new. They do. They get hitched. They have sex with them right away. They start having illegitimate children together. One adulterer with another. The United States is populated with dioceses full of these people. What do? It was a legitimate moral problem. Do we break up all these new, yes, they're illegitimate households, but do we break them up? All these kids, it's not their fault that their parents are a couple of adulterers. JP2 says, 1981, no, you can stay together, but mom and dad have to have maybe separate bedrooms, or they can share a bedroom, but they have to have little twin beds like Ricky and Lucy. Solved it. The very next year, 1982, Cardinal Casper begins the crusade. I want all that under the auspices of caring about the kids in such unions, even though the problem's already been solved. But I want to change the sex rules forever in the Roman Catholic Church. I want these two people to be able to keep doing it. Even though you solved the problem last year in 1981, JP2. Well, JP2 shut him down. Benedict did whatever the hell he did, right? Kicked the can down the road and then quit on us. And then we get Francis, who says, Cardinal Casper, you waited 35 years. Let's get your plan, your pro-adultery plan. without solving any real problem, because that problem was already solved. He just said, okay, now adultery can no longer, let me read from paragraph 301 one more time. Adultery can no longer simply be said that all those in such irregular situation are living in a state of mortal sin. You can't say that about adultery. You can't just say they're deprived of sanctifying grace. That's directly out of paragraph 301. Okay? We'll get more into detail in this article that helped me to put all this together. Holy cow, a lot of the Pope-splainers are just honest people that have come into the faith in the last couple of years, don't know any of this history, don't even know what Familiaris Consortio is or what it did. They probably think that Amoris Laetitia solved the problem that Familiaris Consortio did. It's not their fault, because Francis claimed to have solved that problem even though it was already solved in 1981. He just tended to it by giving a solution that can't be given. And there's no one that's sorting this out. Even knowledgeable people like Larry Chapp are saying, oh, this is just a pastoral issue. No, this is a hard issue with moral philosophy, with action theory, Thomism. You cannot have sex with an adulterous second spouse and then go to communion, even though Francis is now teaching that you can and put it into the AAS. So we'll talk in some detail about that. We'll talk about his coming change announced yesterday to the conclave system, probably also an unmakeable change. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But first, I want to remind you all, if you want to support this channel, starting in 3 days' time is the most important class you could take, and I'm offering it for absolutely free for those of you who can't afford to make a donation to Timothy J. Gordon, to me, the private man with a webcam, dad with a webcam. We have a suggested donation of $100, unrelated to anything we do here, anything I'm doing in the class. $100 suggested, but absolutely free to everyone who can't make the donation. It's on the Nicomachean Ethics. I'm going to teach you how to actually judge moral philosophical claims based on the most important text in Western philosophy, the only text I would say every man or woman out there, Catholic or not, needs to have read. Philosophy is for a special class, not the Nicomachean Ethics. So on Wednesday, and all Wednesdays at 5 p.m. CST starting November the 8th, a free Nicomachean Ethics class. Go to timothyjgordon.com and sign up now for this free class. Spaces are limited, even though we have a lot. We have a lot of seats open. We'll fill them all. If you have the money, give us a private donation, but it's unrelated to anything we're doing there or here. That's just, if you can, donate to me, the man. Same thing with regard to another class that's opening up the following week on Thursdays. The Ask Your Husband Book Club. This will meet every 2 weeks, not every week. It starts on Thursday, November the 16th. Not this week, but next week. Every other week, Steph will walk you through a chapter of her 8-chapter book. Again, we'll take private donations. We suggest $100, but it's totally free, and the donations are unrelated to anything we do here. So that's 2 ways we give back. Ethics class, Ask Your Husband Book Club. Help the marriages out there, help the individuals out there. You need to understand ethics. Also, if you want to support this channel, Locals and Subscribestar, related to, connected to this video, is how you can become a Locals or Subscribestar supporter. Also on Wednesdays, if you are a supporter, we are going through all 3 books of the Lord of the Rings series. We're still at the beginning of Fellowship. You can get caught up now. We're reading chapter 5. They're relatively short chapters for Wednesday. And that class meets at 6:30 CST, right after the ethics class. Okay, so let me read to you from this article. The big idea here is that the Pope-splainers out there do not know, do not understand. They simply and straightforwardly don't grasp that in 2014 and 2015, when Francis was holding synods, the express goal of these synods was, how do we allow divorced and remarried adulterers to have sex with each other, continue having sex with each other for life, for the rest of their lives, make zero changes, continue mortal sinning, and but be a full part of the church, meaning you receive communion and confession. You can't go to confession. You can't go to communion. This was what I watched 9 years ago, 8 years ago at the 2014-2015 Synod, when I read every bit of news, more voraciously than I read news even on the synods now. I was a first-year attorney in a law firm then. I read up so thoroughly, usually on 1 Peter 5, but also LifeSite News. And I just read everything. Cardinal Casper had been trying to do this since 1982. Under the auspices of, how do we help these people? These people can't help their way of life. They made a mistake. This is what the moral relativists in the church always do. They made a mistake. They can't go back in time. They don't have a time machine. They divorced their wife and they married a new civil wife or a new civil husband. And they popped out some illegitimate children with that new spouse. What do? Break up their new marriage? Who are we to do that? Well, this is a lie. And a lot of people that should know better have bought the Pope-splainer lie that this is what 2014-2015 was about. The family synods. How do we help these people? There are a lot of them. In America, there are a lot of civilly remarried divorcees. But this problem had been solved definitively by Familiaris Consortio, by JP2 in 1981. Let me read this article from Catholic World Report, February the 15th, 2017. I had to dig to find this, and that's what you watch this show for. I had to dig to find it. Vatican's top legal aid says divorced and remarried may receive communion. This is Cardinal Coco Palmerio, who, by the way, was at the gay orgy of cocaine at the CDF and let out by Vatican police in summer of 2017. People were saying, oh, no, he wasn't there. And I retouched on this a few months ago. He was. I went and I found the article after the fact. Paul Murillo was at a sex pervert party with cocaine and male prostitutes at the Holy Office, where the Carabinieri got called out, the Rome police. They let him out the back door. I think this might have been that apartment that had doors to both Rome and the Vatican. It's a special place for sneaking in drugs and prostitutes at the Holy Office. And so this is him who is defending Amoris Laetitia. The head of the Vatican office charged with interpreting church laws has said that divorced and remarried persons who want to change their situation but cannot may be admitted to communion without living in continence. So just so this is clear, this CWR article is talking about people who are adulterers who, quote, want to stop having sex, adulterous sex, with someone other than their spouse who they're living with, but cannot. Let's see what he means by cannot. The church could admit to penance and to the Eucharist faithful who find themselves in an illegitimate union when two essential conditions occur. He says they want to change the situation, but they are unable to fulfill their desire. They want to change their situation, but they're unable to fill their desire. Cardinal Francesco Coco Palmerio wrote in his booklet, Chapter 8 of the Post-Synodal Apostolic Exhortation of Amoris Laetitia, published last week. His interpretation, we kind of knew it in early 2017, but it was mostly favored by Francis. But since that time, in the almost 7 years since his book on Chapter 8 came out, Francis has fully made clear by answering dubia at the beginning of the synod, this is absolutely the only correct interpretation of Chapter 8 of Amoris Laetitia. That people who are adulterers should be allowed to have sex with each other. They should not have to fulfill familiaris consortio and live continently in the same home, even though they're adulterers, in order to go back to communion. Is this clear? Because I haven't understood what people don't get about this material heresy that Francis put into the AAS, put into the magisterium 7 years ago. I haven't understood how you guys are out there defending him. I realized you didn't understand. He's saying specifically with the 2014-2015 synods and Amoris Laetitia, we argued specifically for just one thing, that these adulterers can continue doing the deed, having sex with each other and going to communion. You see? Cardinal Coco Palmerio is president of the Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts. His booklet, published by the Vatican Publishing House and presented February the 14th on Valentine's Day, how perverted, at a Vatican press conference, offers his own interpretation of Amoris Laetitia, which has since been ratified. He said it is aimed at grasping the rich doctrinal and pastoral message of Francis's 2016 apostolic exhortation. So he's being honest here. It is a doctrinal change. Part of the reason for writing it, he said, is because the exhortation's 8th chapter has been judged with either negativity or with certain reservation. Of course it has, because it's material heresy. In the text, Cardinal Coco Palmerio extensively quotes Amoris Laetitia, saying Chapter 8 illustrates both the clear doctrine of the Church on marriage, as well as the conditions in which, due to serious repercussions, couples living in irregular unions, that means adulterers who have shacked up together, might be able to receive communion. Remember, adulterers who are shacked up together, I'm sorry to beat you over the head with it, but a lot of people don't understand this. Adulterers who are shacked up, if they promise not to have sex with each other, it was changed in 1981. Familiaris Consortio by JP2 made the change. They can stay living together if they need to because they had children together. Too late to go back on that. Okay? Coco Palmerio reaffirmed the Church's teaching on the indissoluble nature of marriage and stressed that the Church must in no way renounce to proposing the full ideal of marriage, God's plan in all its greatness. Any form of relativism or an excessive respect in the moment of proposing it would be a lack of fidelity to the gospel and also a lack of love for the Church, he said. However, remember the but philosophers? However, he noted that, as said in Amoris Laetitia, there are many complex factors. You know relativism's coming. You know the heretics are coming for you. Many complex factors contributing to why marriages fail and irregular unions are so common, such as abandonment by a spouse. That's not an annulment situation. If you had a valid marriage and you got abandoned or they go crazy, you're out of luck. You don't have to live with them. They're gone, but you can't get remarried. Or cultural stigmas or other mitigating factors. The Cardinal pointed to paragraph 301 in Amoris Laetitia, which reads, I've already read this, let's go again. Quote, it can no longer simply be said that all those in any irregular situation, adulterous second union, are living in a state of mortal sin and are deprived of sanctifying grace. You can't say that anymore. You can't call mortal sin mortal sin. By referring to any irregular situation, the exhortation, in his opinion, intends to refer to, quote, all those who are married only civilly or living in a de facto union or are bound by previous canonical marriage. We're just talking about adulterers. People that want to have sex with someone besides their one spouse. That's all we're talking about. Okay, that's all irregular situation means out of the mouths of people like relativists like Francis and his cronies. That's all they mean. People that wanted to go have sex with someone besides their spouse, number one, and did go have sex with someone besides their spouse, number two, and want to continue doing it while receiving the Eucharist, number three. That's all this is about. Further quoting that paragraph, 301, the cardinal said, "A subject may know full well the rule, yet have great difficulty in understanding its inherent value." So you might know you can't have sex with people besides your wife, men. But you might end up having sex with someone besides your wife, and the rules might allow you to go get communion anyway, is what he's suggesting. This is absurd. You might be in a concrete situation which does not allow him or her to act differently and decide otherwise without further sin. Factors which exist which limit the ability to make a decision. So what Francis actually says in AL and Coco Palmario, remember, the cocaine male hooker party attendee, Coco Palmario, that's the guy presenting the theory which Francis favored of Casper's plan, which Francis codified. It's saying it might be a sin for you to break up with your concubine, which is wrong moral philosophy. Offering the example, now this is really important. Pay attention here, parish orphans and retrogrades. Pay attention here. I'll walk you through the moral philosophy, okay? Because they're trying to thread a needle with some moral philosophy tricks that you didn't know about Familiaris Consortio. You also don't know about action theory and when the principle of double effect kicks in and when it doesn't because of this two natures of sin. There's an objective grave matter in every sin. There's also got to be a consent to subjectively, by a full act of the will, consent, invitation in of the objective grave matter of the sin. And they're going to play on this, and you're going to say, oh, that's why we can't talk about grave matter objectively. Pay attention. Offering an example of the situation in which a person might be fully aware of the irregularity of their situation, meaning they're committing adultery, yet faces great difficulty in changing it for fear of falling into greater sin. Cardinal Coco Palmario pointed to couples in a new union who can't separate due to serious reasons such as the education of their children. Two adulterers have a bastard child, and they're all three living together as if they're a marital union, like a family. They're not a family, okay? They're two adulterers with a bastard child. I know it's common, but it doesn't make it a family in God's eyes. It's not a sacramental family. They're living together. Coco Palmario is saying there are serious reasons to stay together, such as the education of your children. Coco Palmario, the old prostitute-loving cokehead, is literally lying to you. He's talking about this as a problem which Familiaris Consortio did not fix in 1981. You could stay living together, adulterers with your bastard children. You can. JP2 gave you pontifical permission in a way which is faithful to church teaching. You can all stay under one house. These people don't care about educating their children anyway. They're adulterers. Their children see adulterous parents. Now, maybe I buy that they care about the education of their children if they actually agree to live continently for the next 40 years. And anytime they get amorous or randy, they just say, nope, got to go take a cold shower, Got to go say a rosary, got to get away from this woman was my concubine. But you stay living in the same house, you homeschool them together, you live as brother and sister. Okay, I'll buy that. But we're not talking about those people. We're talking about the people that want to have sex with each other, like the old cokehead pervert, Coco Palmerio, is lobbying for, who he's stumping for. So the education of their children, if they want to live together and homeschool together their bastard children, they're allowed to after 1981's Familiaris Consortio. He also used the example of a woman cohabiting with a man and his 3 children after they had been abandoned by his first wife. This won't get you off the hook either. We're running through all these test cases. In the book, Coco Palmerio said the woman had saved the man from a state of deep despair, probably from the temptation of suicide. You can't just say that. Okay, so the man's wife left him. If they're validly married and they can't get annulled, then tough rocks. You know, pick better in the next life. It sucks. But you could raise your kids. You know, you just can't have sex with a new lady. That's all. You can try to get your old wife back. Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. But Coco's saying, oh, because he can't have sex with someone, he's going to commit suicide. No. He won't commit suicide. He'll get over it. He's got 3 beautiful children to raise. He's too busy, assuming he's not a sleazebag, to think about his own libidinal urges. Just be celibate and raise your children joyfully. The couple had been together for 10 years, adding these adulterers have now been together, and they added a bastard child to the mix, an illegitimate child, with the woman making considerable sacrifices to help raise the other 3. Great. Perfect. I mean, they sinned by having sex with each other because they're adulterers, philanderers. You can't have sex with someone besides your spouse. But they had a kid out of their perversity, their perverse extramarital sex. While the woman in the hypothetical situation is fully aware of being in an irregular situation. Notice they're not saying a mortally sinful situation because they don't think adultery is a mortal sin. And she would honestly like to change her life. She evidently can't, the cardinal said. He explained, this is very interesting hypo. He explained that if she left, the man would turn back to the previous situation and the children would be left without a mother. But again, in hypothetical number 2, this is already solved by Familiaris Consortio. They know that most of you guys out there are normies. What did I say the other day? You just get sick of thinking about a problem and you're like, I'm going to just trust the authorities here. No matter how many male hookers and blow parties this guy goes to, he's the cardinal. I'm going to trust him. No matter how much heresy, material heresy, Francis instantiates in the AAS, I'm just going to trust him. No. The man does not need to turn back to the previous situation. The woman do not need to be left without a mother. Even though she's not married, she was never married to their father in the first place. She can stay at the home. She can live in the same home with the father. They have to live as brother and sister. No sex. Familiaris Consortio saved it. The kids don't care if their parents are having sex. Most of us wish our parents, if they could have somehow spawned us without having sex, did so. Because it's a gross concept. This is an ideal situation for a kid. To leave then would mean the woman would fail to carry out her duties toward innocent people, namely the children. We're not talking about leaving. So this is why a lot of you popes blame, because you hear the lies of Coco Palmerio and Francis and Cardinal Casper. See what they're doing? They're talking about the needfulness of Amoris Laetitia when Familiaris Consortio solved the problem. There is no situation, we'll talk about it in a second in greater detail, there's no situation which requires, under the protection of the principle of double effect, 2 adulterers who are already allowed to live together if they're continent sexually, to start having dirty, horny sex with each other. That doesn't benefit the children. It doesn't benefit the children for their adulterer parents to commit adultery. They can take a vow of continence, sleep in the same bedroom, just get different beds. It's a pretty near occasion of sin all the time, but that's a prudential decision JP2 made. Some people heroically do this. They've married some new lady or man that's not their spouse, and they're like, we will live together as brother and sister. I had a friend who knew someone that did this for 40 years and never slipped up once they decided to. But he's lying. So the popes, a lot of you out there popes-plain just because you haven't thought of all the moral hypotheticals. The woman would fail to carry out her duties toward innocent people, namely the children. Bullshit. Not true. She's allowed to be there. Carry out your duties. She's not allowed to sexually gratify her adulterous, live-in, pretend husband. No, they got to be like brother and sister. Because of this, Coco Palmario says, it's then evident that she couldn't leave without new sin occurring. This is situation 3. She leaves. She leaves. That's not new sin. If under familiaris consortio, which allows conditionally the continued cohabiting of two adulterers, as long as they're continent, if they just think, look, we can't do this, but rather than go to hell because it's a mortal sin for us to have sex with each other, just let's go our separate ways, right? Yeah, the kid will, the kid that we had together, well, trade off time or whatever. Maybe she could look for a house right next to him. That would be less of a temptation. But whatever. Maybe it's just across town. That's not a new sin. These people, if they're serious enough to take the moral demands of Jesus Christ, no divorce, at least no sex with new people after a divorce, then they're gonna, be a good team at making sure they each see the kid enough. There's no new sin there. This is fathomed. It is not a sin for them to say, we can't live continently. The new sin would be to throw in the towel and say, let's just have sex with each other. That's the new sin. And Coco Palmario says they're trying to avoid new sin. He's suggesting that it would be sinful for her to say, let's split up. I can't live in your bedroom. We'll start doing it. I'll get a house in the neighborhood far enough away that we don't have to deal with each other, except for maybe we homeschool the kids together, because this is the situation he brought up, for an hour each morning. And yeah, it's sad, but it's the best we can do. We're a couple of adulterers, a couple of divorcees. Speaking on the point of continence, now we come to it after 3 failed hypotheticals that Amoris Laetitia uses dishonestly to make adulterous sex okay. The cardinal pointed to St. John Paul II's 1981 Apostolic Exhortation Familiaris Consortio. Oh, Coco Palmario does know about this, and it already solved the problem. In the document, St. John Paul II taught that the divorced and remarried who for serious reasons cannot satisfy the obligation to separate, which is not a sin, by the way. It's not a sin. They may receive absolution, which would open the way to communion only if they take on the duty to live in complete continence, live as brother and sister. This is a irreformable teaching of the church, not just because JP2 put it in Familiaris Consortio, but because it's the teaching from the New Testament, the teaching of our Lord Jesus, the teaching of tradition. It can't be changed. Well, guess what? Cardinal Casper, Pope Francis, changed it. Not a pastoral issue. This is a doctrinal issue. However, for Coco Palmario, while the couples who are able to do this should, For others, the temptation of infidelity increases the longer a couple refrains from sexual intimacy, potentially causing greater harm to the children. Well, now, this is where it all just falls apart, the reasoning. The temptation of infidelity, if divorcee A, man, is living with divorcee B, woman, the temptation of infidelity is for them to have sex with each other. Coco Palmerio is talking about these two people as if they're married, just because they're civilly remarried. And he's playing on this ambiguity and the relative ignorance of Catholic normies out there to do a little sleight of hand. They're not married. So when he says the temptation of infidelity increases the longer this couple refrains from sexual intimacy, as if he's quoting St. Paul, who said, you guys, married people, you should have sex pretty often. Because, I mean, really married people, married in God's eyes. Because if you don't have sex often, both parties are going to be an occasion of sin. Well, this doesn't exist for these people. These people are not married to each other. The civil law might say they are, but they're not. There's no infidelity. If that man checks out a cute chick in a miniskirt, that's infidelity, not to the woman he's calling his new civil spouse. He owes her nothing. He owes her zilch. That's marital infidelity to his first spouse, whom he divorced, whom he's been having sex with woman B with, and who he's looking at woman C's miniskirt with. So you see how Coco Palmerio and Francis lied to you guys. They tricked you with this. There's no marital infidelity between man A and woman B if they're both adulterers who have each divorced man A's wife, let's call her C, and woman B's husband, let's call him D. That's the sexual marital infidelity. And it doesn't cause any harm to the kids for this new pair of adulterers who are pretending to be married to not have sex with each other at all. They straight up tricked you by playing a shell game. Husband, wife, they have to be fidelity. We're going to use this line of scripture. Come together often so that fidelity does not become a major temptation in your life. Yeah, that sounds right. But you forgot. The fidelity A owes is to his first wife, C. The fidelity B owes is to her real husband, D. Not first wife, first husband. They're only wife and husband. There is zero harm, zero sin in them not looking at each other sexually. They're not spouses. You see what they did? See how they crossed a few basic wires and even Sorbamari, sounds like Larry Chapp, implicitly fell for it. He refers now to footnote 329 of Amoris Laetitia, Coco Palmerio. The footnote is a reference to the quoting of St. John Paul II's words in Familiaris Consortio, acknowledging that some of the divorced and remarried cannot, for serious reasons, separate. They have new kids. Maybe they should be around each other if they can handle it. The footnote now here's another lie. The footnote applies 329 in Amoris Laetitia. I remember reading this, calling out bullshit on it. It applies the words of Gaudium et Spes, where the intimacy of married life is broken off, its faithfulness can sometimes be imperiled and its quality of fruitfulness ruined, which is itself a reframing of St. Paul in Holy Scripture. In its context, it speaks about truly married couples. Gaudium et Spes, St. Paul in Holy Scripture. They're talking about married couples. A divorced and civilly remarried is not a married couple. They're just a couple of horny adulterers. They're applying these words to the divorced who have entered a new union. Same thing Coco Palmerio did above. He got it from the Pope, Francis. Footnote 329 of Amoris Laetitia. Where intimacy of married life is broken off, its faithfulness can sometimes be imperiled and its quality of fruitfulness ruined. footnote 329 refers to married people. So all footnote 329 should admonish is that spouse to go find her true spouse and have sex with him. She thinks she's divorced from him. The husband to go find his true spouse. He thinks he divorced her. Find her, live with her, have sex with her. Often. Great. These two new people that you want to have sex with, you're strangers. Yeah, you might have had a kid together. Yes, one option might be to stay together and raise your kid, but you're still not allowed to have sex with each other. Coco Palmerio stressed that while for him, the desire to change one's situation, despite the inability to do so, is enough to receive communion, the conditions must be carefully and authoritatively discerned on the part of ecclesial authority, which would typically be the couple's parish priest, who knows the couple more directly and they can therefore offer adequate guidance. This is a universal. The parish priest doesn't know more than the principle of non-contradiction. You can't have two spouses. You can only have sex with one person, the person you married on your wedding day. Even if they became a jerk, even if they got fat, even if they became ugly, even if you stopped desiring them after your wedding night, that's the only person. Maybe they became a huge feminist. Don't care. That's your wife, dude. Maybe the guy becomes a huge jerk and everyone's afraid of him. That's your husband. You don't have to have sex with him every day. If he's actually dangerous or she's actually noxious, you don't even have to live together. You can get separated in those situations. But you can't go have sex with someone else. But for Coco Palmerio and Francis and Cardinal Casper, these three men, the only instance in which a couple in an irregular situation could be barred from communion is when, knowing they're in grave sin and being able to change, they have no sincere desire to do so. They haven't dealt with familiaris consortio. Well, I can only say it so many times. He also suggested that a diocesan office charged with advising on difficult marital situations could be necessary or at least useful. What are they going to do? Francis and his lieutenants, they use, let's study it up close. It's complex. It's really not. There is not a whit about this situation that's complex. Marriage is hard sometimes. When marriage gets hard, the men, and often the women, start wanting to have sex with other people. It's not complex, actually. It's very simple. People are lazy. Relationships take more work than anything, and people are lazier with relationships than even their jobs. So when they start wanting to have sex with other people, they just want to go indulge the urge. Francis and Casper and Coco Palmerio say, if you study the situation enough, that these would-be adulterers can commit adultery and still receive communion and go to heaven. If you study it long enough, maybe 2 and 2 will be 5. Just study it. Study it. Francis, JP2 solved it. He came up with a creative solution. You can't have sex with the new person the way you really want to. I know you do. I know you guys, you horny perverts want to. But remarried adulterers cannot. You can live together, but this is going to be heroic. Most people can't pull it off. Most of you separate, find a way, if you care about your illegitimate children you had in this adulterous second union, find a way to spend at least an hour together every day. Maybe you homeschool each other and take a cold shower later. Whatever the hell you have to do, you do it. But this way you, the spouse, and the new child can all go to heaven, which is what really matters. No, you can't have sex. Coco Palmerio wants you to be able to study the situation. Maybe you need to study it with a priest. The priest will just say, yeah, go ahead and have sex. We know priests do this. They're modernists. Palmerio Coco Palmario, was absent when his book presentation was made. Other people presented it. Several bishops, Malta, Germany, have said divorced and remarrieds may receive communion. Many have maintained the church's traditional discipline. And Gerhard Muller is with the faithful ones. You have to have continuity on church teaching. Now, the case is such that this weird circular square called the Pope-splainer exists, where you have someone like Cardinal Mueller that's just like, it doesn't matter how much you study adultery, you can't commit the actual act. Francis keeps saying, well, I'm going to study it and see if something changes. This is what he said in 2014, 2015. I'm going to study it long enough, see if maybe by looking at it the 10,000th time, things will reverse. And all 9,999 previous times yielded an opposite answer. And now it's different. Now all of a sudden you read scripture and the Lord says, please thyself, go get a hot new spouse, second spouse, and have sex 10 times a day, and you can come to heaven too. Maybe if you study it long enough, Francis says, that'll happen. And then Francis made it happen. He didn't make it make sense, which is where we are now. We are living in the post-revolution world. It doesn't make sense. The principle of non-contradiction abides. Francis cannot have made this change, yet he did in 2016. What they're trying to say is, why they want to study it is there some hypothetical situation where familiaris consortio does not cover every single conceivable human being who might find themselves in a niche situation. And you need at least one test case of someone that needs to have sex with their adulterous second spouse, not a spouse, their adulterous play spouse, so that they can say it, oh, familiaris consortio didn't cover the whole rule. Is there some situation where, if it's even one person on the face of the earth needs to have sex, needs to indulge the adulterous impulse, then we'll throw that at everyone, and the German bishops and whoever wants to will use it. That's what Francis, that's his oxygen. The problem is, here's the best that Francis came up with in Amoris Laetitia and explaining Amoris Laetitia. Well, the same couple, male adulterer A, female adulterer B, they play married, they have sex, they have an illegitimate child. 10 years later, they want to come back to the church. Okay? Well, maybe the woman is more serious about coming back to the church than the man. They try living for a year by familiaris consortio, and the man starts saying, I'm not too serious about this, lady. I know we're just brother and sister in Christ. You're not my spouse. My spouse lives across the country. But we had a kid together. And we're raising this kid, even though we're not a proper family. But I really want to have sex with you. Francis says it can get her off the hook. She can give in and say, okay, we can have our cake and eat it too, against the timeless teaching of the church, against familiaris consortio. If all he does, the man, is he threatens, I'm going to leave this adulterous second union. If you don't have sex with me, I give up on the familiaris consortio solution, continence. Francis says the principle of double effect covers the situation where, like shooting someone who's advancing on you with a knife. A foreseeable yet unintended evil consequence, the way action theory would explain it. All of a sudden you can kill someone just because they're advancing on you? Well, yes. because there's a double effect that's justifiable that is covered in simultaneous real time. That's really what you're intended. This unintended yet foreseeable. Things can be foreseeable yet unintended. Consequence is allowable given the circumstances. The principle of double effect does not hold for Francis. There's a problem in his moral philosophy. It's because of that paragraph I made a big deal out of. Let me reread it right now. It's footnote 329, where the intimacy of married life is broken off, its faithfulness can sometimes be imperiled and its quality of fruitfulness ruined. Francis tries to apply this to the divorced and remarried who have entered this new union. So what he's saying is that if the man in this situation has threatened, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave our adulterous second union. Even though we tried Familiaris Consortio's continence for a year, I'm really, really horny, is what he's saying. Have sex or I'm going to leave you. Francis is saying, well, this woman has no choice. So even though it's objective grave matter to have adulterous sex with this perv, she's allowed to because she's not consenting subjectively to sin because of something like the principle of double effect. She's literally just consenting to avoid a second evil. And he doesn't actually say the PDE applies, principle of double effect, but it's implied that because her will is so little involved, she's between a rock and a hard place. She's actually saying, okay, I'll have sex with you and I'll keep going to communion. Doesn't work. Why? Because there's no hard place that she might be in between a rock, but there's no hard place she's crammed into. If the guy, all she has to do is say, okay, bye. This is an adulterous second union anyway. Oh, well, we won't be living in the same house as our kid. Okay. Well, there's still ways to work around that. Get a house, half a mile away in the neighborhood and make sure we each help homeschool the kid for an hour or two. Familiaris Consortio still abides. So it's this trick, this Parler trick that Francis used that is a doctrinal error. Attempting to apply Gaudium et Spes' words and St. Paul's words, where the intimacy of married life is broken off, its faithfulness can sometimes be imperiled. Apply it to something that's not a marriage. You owe no faithfulness to each other. You are brother and sister in Christ alone. Even if you had a kid together, that kid's a bastard, he's illegitimate, it's not real. You don't owe a duty to each other, such that if you can't continue living together as brother and sister, what's the next best thing in this really messed up situation? It's just to part. So there is no cudgel, there is no shoehorn the way Francis imagined it. Francis knows there's not because he's a really smart guy. He's just an evil guy. And he's talking as if these words about avoiding the temptation of sin in marriage applies to civilly remarried adulterers. And it doesn't. And it's that simple. It is that simple. There is not one conceivable subjective situation where this woman could consent to having adulterous sex with her partner in adultery, not living continently any longer, where she would be off the hook. You can't, spit them at me. Ask Pope splanners, what's one situation? Well, he says he's going to leave if she doesn't have sex with him. Let him leave. That's not her spouse. Each of their spouses are somewhere else anyway. Well, yeah, but they had 3 kids apiece with each of their spouses, like the Brady Bunch, let's say, and 1 kid together. That one kid together that they had will be robbed of his parents. Well, yeah, this is arithmetic. There are still 3 kids from each of their previous unions. They should go get together with that spouse. And then 3 kids out of 4 will be living in 2-parent homes with their actual parents. The real spouses will be together times 2. Man with his wife, woman with her husband. Let's say they each had 3 previous kids that were being stripped of living with both of their parents. And then, that one kid that they had together, that one bastard illegitimate child, will have to do the UTEP 2-step, go back and forth between homes. That's still better than the other 6 kids continuing to live without both parents. Unless you're saying the solution is they all live together like sister wives. So you got fooled. Anybody out there I've named, anybody who's ever Pope-splained, you got fooled by the misapplication of Gaudium et Spes to invalid marriages. There is no sin. There's no possible way that if a couple of horny adulterers break up, that they're sinning. Well, what if they had a kid together? Yeah, even then. They shouldn't be living together. JP2 bent the rules a little bit, which is why he shouldn't bend the rules, but he did not break any of the rules. He bent the rules. He was like, let them live together. It's still not great, but if they promise to live continentally, fine. So all Francis did is he weaponized that bending of the rule, and then he broke it. He was like, well, what if they don't want to? Now let's get back to that. What if they're just really horny? Well, then, if they're really horny and they can't do it, just go back to option 1. Option 1 is each of you go back to your spouses. You had 3 kids with them, even in Coco Palmario's hypothetical. They had 3 kids from their former marriage here, 3 kids from the other former marriage there. Better they're together with the real spouse. And only 1 kid out of 7 in my hypo is not living with his parents, and his parents were never married anyway. So that can't be undone unless you find an 85 DeLorean with 1.21 gigawatts of lightning power in the flux capacitor. Pope Francis. Doesn't exist. No hypos. I challenge anybody out there. Michael Lofton. Anybody. Familiaris consortio abides. There's not one single morally permissible situation using action theory, Thomism, the moral theory of the church. Because that's what I really know about is moral theory. I forget about familiaris consortio, this or that. But JP2 had it right. If you can live continentally, you could pull this off and stay on the same roof. Really, you should just split up. And splitting up is not a sin. It can't be a sin. Well, they had a kid together. Yeah. They had a bastard child together. Tried to do the best they can in different homes. So JP2 really, really, really nailed it with Familiaris Consortio, but it was weaponized later. It was weaponized later by Francis and then overcome. Okay, now the new overcoming of a JP2 document by Francis, spitting in the face of it, abrogating it, whatever you want to call it, is that according to the remnant and Diane Montaigne, as of yesterday, November the 4th, Francis is drafting a new document to reform the papal conclave. The remnant has learned that a Vatican document is currently under review by Pope Francis that would reform the papal conclave to exclude cardinals over the age of 80 from its prep phase. They were never able to vote, but they were always included in the preparatory phase. It would also radically reshape the general congregations, and it would potentially revolutionize who elects the Pope by having laity and women religious comprise 25% of the vote. So he's actually pitching lay investiture, one of the 3 biggest problems of the medieval church, as a solution, as a good thing. He's trying to bring back lay investiture, Francis. Well-informed Vatican sources have confirmed to the remnant that a series of meetings have been held at Santa Marta since late spring between Pope Francis and Italian Jesuit canonist Cardinal Gianfranco Ghirlanda, with one specific goal: to reform JP2's 1996 Apostolic Constitution on the vacancy of the Apostolic See and the election of the Roman Pontiff. Universi Dominici Gregis. There's a violation in Francis's election, by the way, of Universi Dominici Gregis, according to even Francis's biographer, Austin Ivory. Universi Dominici Gregis, and this might be the reason that Francis is trying to overcome it. He lete sententiae excommunicates anyone who stumps for, pamphlets for, before a conclave, a particular candidate. And I believe that candidate, if the candidate accepts it, lete sententiae excommunication, and this is precisely what, according to Francis's man, it's beautiful, Austin Ivory, in his first edition of The Great Reformer, said happened. The Sankt Gallen Mafia pamphleted for Francis before the conclave, violating Universi Dominici Gregis. Francis allegedly, according to Ivory, said, yes, I'll do it if you want me to be Pope. That would be a lete sententiae excommunication of them all. Less than a week after edition 1 of The Great Reformer came out, they pulled every shelf copy down and they immediately put out a second edition because Ivory, the old idiot, admitted that Francis, according to Universi Dominici Gregis, same text he's now trying to change, would have been excommunicated. Lete sententiae. Did you know that? Did you know that? And same thing with all the Sankt Gallen mafiosi who elected him. That could be why he's trying to overcome the document in toto. Since the end of August, these meetings have become more frequent and were held on a weekly basis until the start of the Synod Assembly in early October, pressing the church to return to the early church. The idea would be to have cardinal electors, the majority of whom Pope Francis has chosen, comprise 75% of the voting, while the remaining 25% would be made up of laymen and women and religious sisters. Papally appointed by Pope Francis in advance of the Apostolic See becoming vacant. The document under review would exclude from the general congregations preceding the beginning of a papal election all non-voting cardinals. So anyone over 80 is just worthless at that point to the process. Now they're in the sort of prelim phase. They can't vote. He's getting rid of them and he's bringing in a bunch of women and lay people. Many contend that the Pope is made in the general congregations, even before the voting. Lots have said the general congregations where the older than 80 electors know a lot of stuff and influence a lot of people, so they still matter. It's in this preparatory phase that the problems facing the church, qualities needed in a suitable candidate, are discussed. Given the long experience of the cardinals who are over 80 and the pivotal role they play in shaping the ideas of the cardinal electors, their exclusion would be seen as wounding the Sacred College and the papal conclave. It would also reduce to an even smaller minority within the discussions those cardinals who had not been appointed by Pope Francis. So that would expand the Francis cardinals' reach. The document would also radically change the procedures and organization of the general congregations, eliminating plenary sessions and establishing small working groups with a head to guide discussions, similar to the October 2023 Synodal Assembly. This would be a synodalizing of the conclaves. In addition to making a bad thing, lay investiture, into a good thing. The remnant has also learned that Cardinal Ghirlanda is seeking to convince Pope Francis to undertake a truly revolutionary act by revolutionizing who elects the Pope, professing to return to the early church before we got rid of this shit with the eradication of lay investiture. The idea would be to have cardinal electors, the majority of whom Pope Francis has chosen, comprise 75% of the vote, while the remaining 25% would be made up of laymen and women and religious sisters, papally appointed by the Pope in advance of the Apostolic See becoming vacant. If promulgated, this document would widely be seen as representing an ecclesial and theological upheaval of papal elections. He hasn't given a definitive yes to it. You can rest assured he will. So, Francis, in today's show, in review, attacking two of JP2's really faithful documents. JP2 did plenty that was a swing and a miss. Costly swing and a miss. But Familiaris Consortio did solve a modern problem as relating to divorce. And Universi Dominici Egregius solved modern problems stemming from the potentially crooked papal conclaves. Francis is trying to re-crookedify both of these. And he already did the one. He already saw to the overturning of Familiaris Consortio 7 years ago. The crazy thing is, you all went to sleep after he did this 7 years ago and gave communion to the divorced and civilly remarried. A lot of people are going to go back to sleep when he continues to wreak havoc on the church. God save us. Please tell your Pope-splaining friends to watch this specific episode. Familiaris Consortio is the solution. Have them watch. God bless you all. Deus Volt. Have a nice Sunday.